Hey guys, I'm Erik Voss, and yes, I know I'm in a new space, but it's still coming together. Don't have time to talk about it because Westworld's amazing first season has come to an epic conclusion. Now, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, which shouldn't be necessary because you were the one who clicked on a video about the ending of a TV show, so it's your own fault. But this season finale revealed way more than I ever expected a show produced by J.J. Abrams to ever reveal. So we got Ford's new, actually violent narrative, the meaning behind the maze, the voices in Dolores'S head, and damn, look at that, the man in black is actually William as an older man. See, that was the sound of thousands of online conspiracy theorists climaxing all at once. Now, in case that threw you for a loop, I made another video breaking down the convoluted timeline of Westworld, reordering the story in the exact chronology. Definitely watch that. But in this video, I'm gonna quickly explain what the hell we just saw, because let's be honest, Westworld threw a lot at us at once. And I think we all felt a bit like Felix. So let's get started. Okay, first question. What was Ford's master plan? So all season long, we saw Ford preparing for his new secret narrative, digging up the city of Escalante and repurposing hundreds of hosts. Then in the final minutes, it's a total bloodbath. He has Dolores execute him exactly like she executed Arnold, and she and all the other hosts open fire on the rest of the board members. So why does he do this? Robert Ford has been a mysterious figure throughout the season, but one clear drive for him was control. His dream was to be the god of his own world, in total control of all his creations. And anytime someone threatened that status quo, they were destroyed. So that sense of order made him an ideological opposite to Arnold, who was the co-creator of the park. Arnold wanted the host to achieve consciousness and destroy Westworld. And Ford, the man of control, realized two things that he has lost control over. One, he's an old man at the end of his life and the end of his career, and the Delos Corporation is close to removing him from power. And two, his old partner Arnold proved to be right. The hosts continued to gain consciousness, and Ford realized that the hosts are the next stage of evolution.
It means that we are done. That this is as good as we're gonna get.
And after years and years of letting these hosts evolve and change into fully sentient beings, and never really doing anything to fix the problem, Ford realized that his time was short and made his final move. One last narrative in which the hosts violently overthrow their lesser evolved predecessors, humans, something that he foreshadowed.
Do you know what happened to the Neanderthals, Bernard? We ate them.
Okay, so Ford's master plan required several steps. One, he created Bernard, a host modeled after his former partner Arnold, whose name, by the way, Bernard Lowe, is actually an anagram for Arnold Weber, which I felt like I was the last person to discover. Anyway, that way, Ford has an assistant and a chief engineer that he could trust with his secrets. Two, Ford built a back door into all hosts so he could always control them. Three, he spent decades allowing consciousness to spring up in the hosts organically, simply wiping their memories and letting the problem reach a point of no return. Four, after years and years of letting Sizemore take care of the narratives, Ford suddenly interferes, then disrupted all the pre-existing narratives to justify building his new secret narrative. Five, he secretly changed the host's prime directives, making them potentially dangerous to humans, and when Elsie discovers this, he sends Bernard to kill her, or maybe just silence her. I'll talk about that later. Six, when Teresa tried to steal the host code for Delos and circumvent Ford, he used Bernard to kill her, as well as cover up the death and their love affair. Seven, he updated Maeve so that she could wake herself up from sleep and believe that she has free will, leading to her plan to escape with Felix. Eight, Ford exploited the back door to stop Bernard from killing him out of anger. However, he also ensured that the bullet only grazed Bernard's cranial shield, so that he could quickly be brought back and interact with Maeve as part of the narrative that he wrote for her. That way, she could go out into the outside world and engage in mainland infiltration, which I'll talk about in a bit. Nine, Ford gave Dolores one final push to achieve full consciousness, knowing that she would use her free will to enact her previous massacre in hopes of freeing herself. And 10, reveal the final narrative as the first step in a violent overthrow, ushering in the next stage of evolution. Now, notice some of Ford's final words.
Mozart, Beethoven, and Chauhan never died. They simply became music.
Now, on a literal level, he's referring to his own final opus, this new narrative that he's built that will change the world. But some people are thinking that Ford may also be hinting that he built a host version of himself, and that this Ford may actually just be a host. Or this is the real Ford, and there's another host version of him somewhere that's ready to carry on his legacy so that Ford can live on through his life's work, these hosts. And this could be plausible, considering Ford does have a secret lab where he built Bernard and could plausibly make new artificial hosts. He also has a huge ego. I could see him doing this. But I also don't really know, because seeing Ford show up and walk around next season, it would kind of take away the power of this perfect farewell. But I could see him coming back in a memory or in a voice form like Arnold did, haunting the hosts from beyond the grave. Either way, Anthony Hopkins did tweet that he's enjoyed working on the show, implying that his work is done on it, so we'll see if he comes back in season 2. Now, let's move on to another mystery this episode dealt with. What is the maze? So, after a season of the maze patterns showing up everywhere and people bringing it up in conversation, this finale revealed exactly what the maze is. So, as explained by Arnold to Dolores, the maze is a metaphor for the journey a host takes to achieve true consciousness. So, initially, Arnold imagined this journey as a pyramid with different layers. The bottom one being memory, because humans need to remember things to learn from them, and then improvisation, because humans tend to deviate from their routine, and then on top of that, self-interest, because humans make decisions to protect and further themselves. But Arnold realized that
consciousness isn't a journey upward, but a journey inward.
So he reimagined these from layers of a pyramid to concentric layers of a circular maze, which was modeled on a children's toy belonging to Arnold's son, in which it would be difficult to navigate your way into the center, just like it's difficult for the human mind to understand its true nature. So in other words, the maze is not a physical place hidden somewhere in Westworld like a huge hedge maze or something, and this isn't something that William can use. This is a metaphor describing how hosts can become conscious. They learn to remember, they learn to improvise, they learn to act in self-interest, and the final key isn't a voice from above, it's a voice from within. And notice how Ford repeated that idea later when describing the brain shape hidden in Michelangelo's painting.
It took 500 years for someone to notice something hidden in plain sight. It was a doctor who noticed the shape of the human brain. The message being that the divine gift does not come from a higher power, from our own minds.
This shows that Ford knows everything Arnold did, and he's been building on his work. Now, you may remember Arnold's pyramid theory was first introduced back in episode 3. And by the way, looking back now, I love how the show visually foreshadowed the circular design by Ford drawing this pyramid in a circle that was previously on the blackboard. But there's a key difference with Ford's pyramid. Arnold only had 3 layers, but Ford added a 4th layer, saying it was the last step of consciousness. And at the end of this episode, Ford tells Bernard what that final component is.
The thing that led the hosts to their awakening. Suffering. The pain that the world is not as you want it to be.
So Ford realized that suffering is a key part of the human experience. The hosts need to feel emotional pain to be truly conscious in the way humans are. So apparently if you've never suffered, you're not human, which is a huge relief because all I do is suffer. So Arnold saw Dolores'S true consciousness when she talked about the grief over losing her parents, and William saw Maeve's true consciousness when he killed her daughter. That suffering is why Ford made Dolores travel on this tortuous journey over and over. He wanted to prime her with enough suffering to achieve consciousness. Now, how do the hosts get to that center of the maze? That's the purpose of the reveries. Remember, reveries are the behavioral responses linked to specific memories. Everyone attributed them to Ford, but they were actually a creation by Arnold. Now, they were supposed to be simple behaviors that made the host more lifelike, but they caused some to malfunction. And that's because Arnold's real purpose for the reveries was to create a link between the layers of the maze, letting the host build on each layer and move inward. He endowed them first with memory, and the reverie caused that to spill over into improvisation, which would lead to acting in self-interest and later result in suffering, basically guiding each host deeper into their own mental maze until they reach the center. Okay, so related to the maze is another mystery. What are the voices in Dolores's mind? So the finale episode's title is The Bicameral Mind, which takes us back again to that scene in episode 3.
He based it on a theory of consciousness called the bicameral mind.
Ford explains to Arnold that the theory of the bicameral mind is to try to give the host consciousness with external voice commands, assuming that the host would hear them as an inner monologue and eventually their own thoughts would take over. And even though he says that they abandoned that plan, this is exactly what we see happen to Dolores in this season. She receives several mysterious voice commands over the course of the episodes, like when she shoots Rebus.
Kill him.
And when she's on the run.
Remember.
So early in the finale, Dolores still doesn't understand the final step.
Do you understand now, Dolores? What the center represents? Whose voice I've been wanting you to hear?
I'm trying, but I don't understand.
But later in the episode, when she reaches full consciousness, she finally understands.
Do you know now who you've been talking to? Whose voice you've been hearing?
All this
Time.
So Dolores' own independent thoughts have now taken over. Now, the show used some really interesting audio tricks here. So if you listen carefully to the earlier instances, the speaker is really hard to make out. It sounds like a mix of several characters.
Kill him, remember.
But in this final instance, the audio separates the mix so that we hear each of the voices one at a time. First Arnold, then Ford, and then finally Dolores.
Time.
This is a really cool way to show that the voice commands were originally created for Dolores by Arnold, perpetuated by Ford, and now assumed by Dolores herself. Okay, another question. What is the meaning of the quote, "These violent delights have violent ends"? So remember, this is a quote Abernathy whispered to Dolores in the first episode, who then shared it with Maeve.
These violent delights have violent ends.
And then in the finale, we learn that this was Arnold's final words
These violent delights have violent ends.
before he had Dolores execute him. And then right before Dolores repeats the behavior with Ford, Bernard repeats it.
These violent delights have violent ends.
So what does this mean? Well, it's established that Abernathy used to be a professor who knew Shakespeare. And These violent delights have violent ends is from Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 6, when Friar Lawrence says the line to Romeo to warn him that a reckless, dangerous romance will end the same way. And this ends up being a theme for Westworld as a whole, that the blissfully violent delights that people take part in have unforeseen consequences, particularly in this case, a judgment day where the recipients of violence return the favor. And it was awesome to see the season bookend with this quote to deliver on that promise so spectacularly. Okay, moving on. What happens to Maeve? So Maeve learns in the finale that her whole awakening and plan to escape was actually just an elaborate narrative scripted by Ford. And if you look closely at Bernard's tablet screen outlining her narrative, you can actually see what the final step is: mainland infiltration. So it seems that Ford's plan was for her to escape Westworld and spread the host revolution to the outside world. But I also think there was a more directly practical purpose behind Maeve's narrative, really to create a diversion, drawing all the park security to battle with Hector and Armistice, who are two of the deadliest gunslingers in the park. This would make it tougher for the security to help fight against the hosts as they try to take over at the gala. But in the last second on the train, Maeve sees a woman with her daughter, and she's reminded of her host daughter. Losing her daughter was her keystone memory that all of her reveries are linked back to, that initially sent her deeper into her own maze. Felix found out for Maeve that her daughter's located in Park 1, Sector 15, Zone 3, and Maeve decides to go off script, even though she had previously assumed that she was already going off script. That defiance to Ford's narrative shows Maeve's true consciousness. And knowing that everything else for Maeve has been pre-scripted by Ford, this may be the first time we see Maeve truly sentient. And going into season 2, when everyone's a little bit evil, Maeve may be the last protagonist on the show that we really root for, making Dolores possibly the new antagonist. And that note from Felix leads me to another big mystery. What is Samurai World? So an interesting thing about that note is that it says Park 1, as in there are other parks. And sure enough, as Maeve tries to escape with Felix, Hector, and Armistice, they enter another part of the complex marked with this SW logo filled with all these samurai hosts. So obviously this sets up season 2 to maybe explore other parts of the park, and it makes sense that if one historical time period existed for an escapist theme park, that there would be alternatives for people who just, aren't into the Old West. And in the 1973 Westworld that this series is loosely based on, there actually were other zones of the park besides Westworld, Medieval World, and Roman World. There was also a sequel that expanded them to Future World and Spa World. I don't know, sounds like the engineers got a little lazy on that one. So I'm not sure if this means season 2 will explore Samurai World in particular, or if it's just meant to open up the possibility that tons of other worlds exist. And finally, one last question from the finale. Are there any humans left alive in the park? So this will be a big question going into season 2. Obviously, William is left alive. Clementine shot him in the arm as the hosts surrounded the gala, and I think that was intentional. Ford respected William, and he appreciated him keeping him financially solvent for all the years of the park. I don't think he wanted this to be a kill shot, just a warning shot to show him that the hosts are now dangerous, and to give him the gift of the exact true life or death game that William had longed for. But there are two other loose threads here. So one is Stubbs, who we saw get tackled by the Ghost Nation natives in episode 9. That guy is pretty tough, and the fact that we didn't see his skull get smashed makes me think that we'll see him again. The other is Elsie. So it was definitely implied that Bernard silenced her, but again, we just saw her get pulled back in a headlock, no blood, no corpse, Also, the show's promotional site for the Delos Corporation posted a mysterious code that, when you decode it, shows Elsie's coordinates in the park and an audio file that sounds a lot like her voice.
Hello?
Okay, now if you were curious about William being revealed as the Man in Black and how that affects the show's complicated timeline, definitely check out my other Westworld video. I get into all that stuff. Also, if you're interested in some deeper predictions for Westworld Season 2, I highly recommend you go watch a video by our old buddy Philip Molino over at SourceFed Nerd. The link is in the description. It's amazing. I miss that guy. He's like the Ford to my Bernard. Wait a minute. Okay, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe to New Rockstars and share this video with your friends. You can also contribute to us on Patreon. Thank you so much to all of our current patrons, including our newest patron, Matthew Salvas. Thank you so much, Matthew. If you aren't currently a patron, we'd love your support. You can hit me up on Twitter at EA Voss with any thoughts or theories that you have about Westworld. Seriously, I love this show. I look forward to talking about it for the foreseeable future. You can also follow New Rockstars on Twitter at New Rockstars for updates on when our videos are coming out. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.